Well, we've come again to summer. I watch every spring for the first day of when it's 90, and that's my first day of summer. And it happened this week, and here we are. The humidity went up, the temperature went up, and there was a tropical storm off Belize. So, you know, we're off to a good start. But I find that this is the time of the year I get a little blue because it's just, we got 4 or 5 long months of hot weather ahead of us, and tropical weather and all of that, and so it's just, okay, here we go again. And so in some ways I feel like these lessons this morning are for me, that they speak to where I am and what I'm going through. We're being told today that we need to build on a firm foundation. And that foundation, the way forward is Jesus. And that doesn't sound like enough to some people. I was really intrigued this week to read some Episcopal publication or another where a woman was writing in, she was saying she loves the idea of community, and she loves Jesus talking about love, and she loves everything except this atonement stuff and this blood stuff. And she's not going to come to church as long as the church talks about that, because that's not the kind of God she has in mind. And I thought, oh, so we're supposed to worship a God who's like you. And that's not what this is about. Jesus has come to teach us about loving God, even though he's really different from us. Jesus comes teaching us to love our neighbor, which is not often easy. He's come to teach us to love ourselves, and I'm so inadequate. Why could anybody love me? He's come to teach us to forgive. He's come to teach us to accept, to practice humility and prayer. It's a total package. And it's hard to do. I don't want you to think that this is an easy life we've been called to. There was a woman in a town one year who was very depressed, and so the congregation had a psychiatrist, and they asked him to go see her. And so Dr. Erickson said he would, and he went out to visit this elderly woman, and he visited her in her home. And while he was sitting there, he noticed all these beautiful African violets sitting in the window. And as he looked around, he noticed that in every window was a different color African violet. And then he noticed an empty pot sitting on the floor near a window, and he suspected that this woman was creating more African violets. She knew how to propagate them. And so she was she was clearly a talented gardener. Well, Dr. Harrison finished his conversation with the woman, and he said he wanted to prescribe something for her depression, but first he wanted her to assure him, he wanted her to give him her word that she would do what he asked. And she did. She agreed. And then he said, "Madam, your problem is not depression. Your problem is that you aren't being a very good Christian." Well, that was not what she was expecting to hear. And she was quite startled. "What do you mean?" she asked. Well, he pointed out that she had this talent for growing African violets. And it was a gift she was keeping to herself. And that if she would simply start making more African violets and sharing them, it would help her. When she had an adequate supply, he wanted her to take an African violet to the home of every new baby in the congregation. And then he wanted her to take an African violet to every member of the congregation who had been hospitalized. And after the doctor left, she began to think about what he said. And she thought, well, she could give it a try. And so the first African violet she took out was to a friend who recently lost her husband. And then she took another to a family who just had a new baby. And soon this became a regular part of her life. Weekend after weekend after weekend, she took African violets out to people who needed them. And she did this for over 10 years. And after about 10 years, she passed away. And in the local paper was an article, "African Violet Queen Dies." mourned by thousands. By living out her Christian faith and sharing this one talent of hers, and she had many, this woman discovered a very meaningful and helpful ministry that helped thousands. Jesus said, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And it's absolutely true. Build your house on the rock. Build your life on the rock. Don't take the easy way out. That's part of what this is about. Don't take the easy way out. Don't follow other gods. I was feeling kind of bitter this spring. And I found myself yelling at God. You know, when's it going to get easy? When's it going to get easy? I asked God. And then I was reading this book that I've discovered called Eat This Book. Our adult class is going to be studying it. And in it, Eugene Peterson said, you know, there's this idea in America that you get to a certain age and you get to retire. And when you retire, the idea is you get all your needs met, no matter how strange they may be. That's this idea in America. And Eugene Peterson asks one question. Where in the Bible does it talk about retirement? It doesn't. Abraham was in his 70s when God said, Abram, take up your family and all that you have and move to the promised land.